Hi folks, Vipin here. Today we're going to talk about India's imports and exports. I think the brightness in this video is a little too intense. That's probably because I've left too many lights on in the hall, and yes, I'm a little too lazy to get off my ass and switch it off. So bear with me for the next few minutes. So let's look at India's imports and exports in detail. Now this happens to be a topic for the economic students of 2nd PU. Now some of the topics which is there in this particular unit I have not explained in detail, like for example the features of WTO. A few minor concepts have not gone into detail because I found them self-explanatory and little too easy. I've just focused on the ones which people find difficult. So let me get started with this. Firstly, what are the features of India's foreign trade? Now I'll quickly run through this. Firstly, more share of the gross national product. Now over the years, India's imports and exports have improved considerably, and this has in fact added to the overall gross national income of this country. Our exports have improved, in fact, may not be significantly, but definitely there has been an improvement. So that improvement has contributed to the gross national product. Then less percentage of world trade. Even though from India's point of view we have seen an increase in our exports and imports, globally speaking we are a little set back when you compare ourselves to other countries, particularly in the world of exports. Change in the composition of exports. Previously India's main exports were manufactured goods, and as you can see, manufacturing has all been shifted to China. So nonetheless, India's exports continue to be quite dominant in the service sector. Change in the composition of imports. Now when you talk about imports here refers to mostly petroleum. But apart from that, the other imports that has been seen an increase in the country would be electronic goods. I'll tell you more about them in detail in a few minutes from now. A dependence on few ports. The large coastline that is there in the country, even though we have a large coastline in the country, the number of important and ports where a large amount of business is done continues to remain quite less. Okay, and then a balance of trade. Even though we have seen an increase in our exports, we still continue to find a problem because India's imports are significantly more than our exports. Foreign trade promotion by the government. Now, Government of India has set up certain institutions for the promotion of foreign trade. Like for example, there is Metals and Minerals Trading Corporation, MMTC. Now that's one of the predominant institutions that's responsible for the promotion of metal export within the country. You even have another institution dedicated for the promotion of steel exports in the country. But nonetheless, the promotion by the government has not been as big as it was expected. Oceanic trade. Most of the trade in India happens through the sea routes. Now we do that because of the large coastline available, and of course most of international trade is done by the sea. The reason being, transport through the sea is one of the most cost-effective methods compared to any other form of transport when it comes to foreign trade. Export-import ratio. Exports in fact are significantly lower than our imports. Okay, exports in fact are significantly lower than our imports. I will tell you more about that when I talk about balance of trade and current account deficit and capital account deficit. The dependent trade. Now when you talk about dependent trade here, dependency of India here refers to how much is it that we need to focus on from the world point of view. That is, when you talk about India's dependency for resources, previously our main dependencies were petroleum. The other products, for example, we would depend on were engineering goods, and even if you remember in the 1970s we had a pretty bad crisis for agriculture as well. So we have been in fact depending on the world for quite a lot of our requirements, and that's also something which is a very important part of our foreign trade. Okay, moving on. The exports of India, petroleum products. When I say petroleum products, it does not include petroleum per se, the extract that we get in the form of fossil fuel, which we in turn convert it into petrol, diesel, etc. Petroleum products here, the main one I can think of would be natural gas. And in fact, natural gas happens to be one of the largest exports of India. I say natural gas because natural gas is a lot like LPG, but unfortunately natural gas is not so stable. But there are other countries in the world that use natural gas for their requirements. India happens to be one of the exporters for that. Jewelry, yes, we happen to be one of the largest exports of jewelry. Jewelry is both gold, silver, precious metals, and even includes crafts and handicrafts as well. Even that happens to be one of our big exports. Automobiles, yes, a lot of automobiles from India are being sold to the rest of the world. One of the main companies contributing to this would be Mahindra and Mahindra. So there in fact you even have automobiles, which are one of the largest exports of this country. Steel, no need to mention that. There happens to be an Indian who owns the largest steel corporation in the world, Mittal Arcelor Lakshmi Mittal. But nonetheless, Tata Group happens to stand the second largest manufacturer of steel in the world. So India is in fact making a large contribution to steel exports. Agriculture, of late organic farming happens to be a major part of India's exports. So we are even contributing to that. And apart from that, tea, coffee and allied products of agriculture also happen to be a part of India's exports. Metals, copper, aluminum, these are also contributing to India's exports. Okay. What about India's imports? Petroleum. No need to explain about petroleum. You're all familiar with petroleum. Electronics. Every phone that you've bought, pretty much every electronic goods that is there, all happens to be something which has been manufactured in China and in turn been imported to India. So pretty much every electronic good there is something which has been imported to India. Gold, yes, we import gold from Switzerland, contrary to people's impression that we actually imported from Dubai. Not really, we imported from Switzerland. One of the largest imports of gold, we get it from Switzerland. Defense equipment, most of India's defense is not indigenous. We either get it from Israel or we end up getting it from Russia, a little bit from America as well. Technology, for example, when you say technology, buying the operating system of Windows, don't giggle when I say buying the operating system of Windows or Android. Even when you buy these operating systems, you are in fact buying technology which is in fact imported into this country. So that's what you mean when it comes to technology imports. So you have two concepts here, that would be current account and capital account. Now, current account is the sum of three things: net factor income, balance of trade, and net transfer of payments. Now what happens here is, in order to understand current account, just look at it as how much income this country is making. Okay, how much income this country is making. But the first factor there would be net factor income. Now what that means here is, you have investors in India who buy shares of foreign companies. Like you have Indian investors who buy shares of say for example IBM, shares of HSBC, shares of Dell, all that they happen to buy. Now when they buy this, they happen to get revenue after they go about buying these shares, revenue in the form of dividend, okay, or any other income, say capital gains, all that. Receiving money from that is what you would refer to as net factor income. In other words, if I have shares of foreign companies or investments in foreign countries, when I get returns on that, that's what contributes to the current account. And then you have balance of trade. The balance of trade is nothing but imports and exports. Net transfer payments, that's the amount of money other countries would give us in case we would request them. All that happens to be a part of current account of India's foreign trade. In case, for example, the money that we get is significantly lower than the money that we have invested, that's what you would refer to as a current account deficit. Now they call it as current account because the investments here happen to be changing continuously. Particularly the first point that I mentioned, that would be the net factor income. Now if I were to be a person who is investing in shares in different countries across the world, how much I invest would keep changing daily. And current account, the income that you can earn, is not something which can be easily measured. So in case if I've invested say ₹1,00,000 in some shares from abroad and I lose my investment in that, and there what you would refer to would be current account deficit. And then capital account. Capital account here refers to say for example investing in capital assets outside the country. Now let's say for example Micromax decides to put up a factory in China. Now when they put up a factory in China, the land and building here is nothing but a capital asset. So when they invest in something like this, they look at long-term gains. If you look at the people who I mentioned here in current account, these are the guys who would look for short-term income. But in case of capital account holders, they expect a long-term rate of return. So Micromax is invested in China, and what could happen over a course of time? If everything works out fine, the factory produces cell phones, the cell phones are sold, Micromax makes good returns when this happens. But if it doesn't work out, their investment in fact results in a failure, and that's what you would refer to as a capital account deficit. Okay, so this is what you would refer to as current account and capital account. Capital account mostly looks at long term, current account looks at short term. Okay. And one more topic which students find a little difficult, multilateral agreements of WTO. Now WTO has got multiple agreements which the member countries end up following. Now recently Russia and a couple of other countries have become the members of WTO, and it's exceeded to 155 plus countries who happen to be the member of WTO. So first one there would be the General Agreement on Trades and Tariff. Now General Agreement on Trades and Tariff here refers to, let me first tell you what a tariff is. If you try to recharge your phone online, they go about asking you what state you're from. Say, are you from Karnataka, are you from Maharashtra, are you from Andhra Pradesh / Telangana, all that they go about asking you. So when they go about doing that, the reason they do that is because the tariff for calls differs in different states. Now just like that, when you want to do business with one country and the other, the cost of doing business with them differs, and that's what you would refer to as a tariff. So all the member countries have agreed upon a uniform tariff when they try to do business with each other, and that's what is nothing but the General Agreement on Trades and Tariff. General Agreement on Trade in Services, GATS as they call it. Now GATS is something wherein you talk about service sector. Say for example healthcare. If India and another member country in WTO were to do business, say India were to assist Russia in the provision of healthcare, okay, how would you go about doing that particular transaction? How do you structure that agreement? That's something what you would come across in GATS. And then TRIPS, trade related intellectual property rights as they would call it. So intellectual property here talks about a patent, an invention, anything which you have come out with, some new invention that you've come out with. How do you go about treating this with the other member countries in WTO is what you would come across in case of TRIPS. Okay, TRIMS, trade related investment measures. So if a company from America wants to invest in India, how would be the procedure that they would go about doing this, And what would be the cost of an American company investing in India? That's something which the TRIMS agreement actually talks about. Okay, now these happen to be the multilateral agreements that is there in WTO. The reason they say this as multilateral is because many countries are involved when these agreements go about being structured. So this is in fact what you would come across in multilateral agreements. I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you for your time. Have a nice day and do subscribe to my videos. Bye.